Alright, welcome back. We're going to finish the process here of processing waswaiwapo and making our birch syrup. So of course, first thing off, we've collected all of our birch water, but of course when we collected it, we had a lot of bugs and little leaves and stuff in there and debris from collecting the water. So first thing we've got to do is, of course, we have our birch water, waswaiwapo. We've got a pot to boil our water in. We need something to strain out the water, just to get all of those leaves and everything out of there. And of course we've got our fire that we're going to be boiling our water on. So like I said before, with waswaiwapo, 80, maybe 90% of it is water, and it's actually only like 10%, maybe even less, that's the syrup that we want. So we're gonna have to pour our birch water into the pot, and it's gonna take a really long process of just getting it to a rolling boil, and we're basically just boiling the water off until all we're left with is the birch syrup. So we'll start that process now. Of course, like I said, we've got a strain. So we're just going to strain right from the bottle here. Take our straining cloth here, and I'm just going to put it over top. Wrap it and tie it on itself, just so when I pour it out, it's going to strain out all of the debris that was in there. So once I've got my strainer on there, all I've got to do is pour it into my pot so I can boil it out. And when you're straining it, you can use anything, as long as you're straining out all of that debris and leaves and everything that was in the water. I've almost got all of my water strained out into the pot. And all I've got left in there is all the leaves and debris that was in the containers. So now I'm just going to stoke up the fire a little, just to get it a little hotter. Because remember, we want to get that water going to a rolling boil, and then we'll keep it at a rolling boil for, sometimes it depends on how much water you have, but it could take hours and hours to boil that water out. But you're basically just separating the syrup from the water by boiling the water out. So I'll set my strained water on the fire. And then we'll wait till that's going to a rolling boil, and we'll show you once it gets to a rolling boil. So we've got our wasquayapo boiling here. It's got a good rolling boil, and we're going to keep it at that boil because we basically got to boil all of the water content out of there. And all we want to get is boil it right down to the syrup. And what happens is we only had about half of our jug. So we only had about half, so that's probably about, say, maybe 15 liters, maybe 10 liters of water in there, and we put that into, and that's what we're boiling right now. So just to do the math a little bit on how we boil it out, we said our water content in our wasquayapo is probably about 90%, maybe even higher, might be even 95% water. But we want to keep boiling it, and depending on how much of the water you collect, you can just keep adding the water as your pot is boiling it out, to get more higher content of the syrup from it as it's boiling out, because it'll continue to boil on like this, and it'll, of course, the water will boil off because the water has a much higher boiling point than the actual sap itself, or the syrup. So of course all of the lighter water will boil off, the heavier syrup and sugars will stay in the pot. And as the more it boils and the lower and lower it goes, the water will actually get darker and darker. You can see here it's already getting a milky color. From when we first poured it, it was right clear. Now it's going milky, and as it boils down, it'll actually start to turn a brownish color, then a darker and darker and darker brown until until it looks almost like black coffee. And that's where we want to keep the water boiling. We're still not done. We keep boiling it until it'll actually thicken. So with this pot, if we keep it boiling, it'll actually start to get darker like coffee, and then darker coffee, and then it'll get thicker and thicker. And once it starts to get the color of dark coffee, we actually want to start stirring it. Otherwise the sugars will settle at the bottom, and those sugars will actually burn. So you want to stir it every now and then once it gets darker and darker. And you'll notice even the liquid will start to get thicker and thicker as you're getting down to the syrup. But like I said, depends on how much water you're boiling out. Definitely depends how much syrup you actually get out of the birch. So just for example's sake, we've already completed the process with some of it, and this is the syrup that we've actually gotten. And this was boiled out of actually about 26 liters of water, so about 7 gallons of the birch water to get this much syrup out of it. And all we did was continue adding until we've added 7 gallons of water, and then we just let it boil down till it got thicker and thicker. And as it got thicker, you're stirring it until finally you're getting the consistency of syrup, because that's just the sugars. And you can see just how thick it gets once you do boil it out. So you can see it's syrup. So it's nice thick syrup. And that's all the sugars and everything that was in that birch tree. And with the birch, the wasquayapo, it's no different than, say, maple syrup. Same process involved in making that, and all you wind up with is the real sticky sugar. And it's a really, you can taste it tastes like syrup. It's naturally sweet. All the natural sugars are in there, and go perfect on paklisagan or pancakes or whatever you want to eat it on. But it's got a really good smooth taste to it. So like I said, this was 26 liters of our water that was boiled in here. So we're hitting at probably about 97% water, and we actually only got about maybe 3 to 5% syrup out of that water once it did boil out. So like I said, you'll keep on boiling this until you get the consistency of syrup, where it's actually thick enough that the sugars are all concentrated and you get that syrup texture out of it. But again, we'll just keep boiling it. If we have more water, we'll just keep adding water as it boils down. We'll keep it at a rolling boil. But like I said, it's a long process. Could take all day, and sometimes, like if you start boiling in the morning, you'll probably be done boiling by the evening if you keep it at a rolling boil like this. And it's got to be a rolling boil. It can't be just simmering, because we want to generate that steam to boil off that water. And like I said, it'll get darker and darker color of light coffee, then dark coffee, then black coffee, and you'll just start stirring it once you get the color of dark coffee, and just keep stirring it until you get the consistency of syrup. And it's totally up to you. Even this could have been boiled down. It depends on how thick you want your syrup. If you want it a lighter consistency, then of course you decide when, just by seeing the consistency in your jar. But of course, the objective is to make that syrup. So this is a syrup consistency. That's where we wanted it. But it's very much a process that you pretty well have to do yourself and decide where you want your birch syrup to get to, what thickness and what flavors you want out of there. But I wish you could taste it, because it's got a really unique flavor. Flavor like no other. It's natural sugars, and you can tell that it's natural and it's healthy and it's really good to eat. So that is the process of taking your waskwai wapo and making it into syrup. So I hope you enjoyed this process, and I really hope you follow these steps and go ahead and try and make your own birch syrup. So thank you for joining me. Kinanas kong tinawaw, kahkyaw, samaga.